So we talked about, you know, one of the practices that Thich Nhat Hanh has in his book is mindfully washing dishes. And I was doing some dishes, and it's quite amazing when you wash dishes just for the purpose of washing dishes. And I was there and I was thinking about him and I was thinking about the teachings that he had, and I was mindfully washing dishes. And I recall that essentially ever since reading that passage in The Miracle of Mindfulness that he wrote, that I've never washed dishes the same. Again, probably for the last 20 years or so, I've washed different dishes differently, with more mindfulness, with more paying attention to the moment of just washing the dish. And to do this, to see if you can do this with anything that comes up in your life. Whether it's washing dishes, taking a shower, drinking coffee, just simply bringing more present moment awareness to whatever you're doing. What you may notice in the practice of mindfulness and pain, et cetera, is that your mind has a tendency to recollect negative emotions or negative experiences, and to bring them up, almost as if our mind is like Velcro, for instance, to negative emotions or experiences. And there's a very good reason for this. Evolutionarily, is actually tied very closely to memory and learning. And so if you think about it, as you were a child growing up, if you touched a hot surface, for instance, or a sharp object, and you hadn't had that experience in the past, that because it was a negative experience, let's say you put your hand on a hot object, a hot stove, and you pull your hand away suddenly, 2, 3, 4 years from that experience, you might still remember the experience. And when you bring up the memory of that experience, you might recollect the emotions that you had during that experience. And evolutionarily, this is actually a survival tool. This is an evolutionarily protection mechanism for us. Okay. If we have greater neuronal circuitry that is created to help us survive, and we survive because, I went into that bush, and let's say it was poison oak. And after I got poison oak, that was a really negative experience. I'm going to remember that plant. I'm going to not want to interact with that plant as much. I remember the hot stove. I'm going to not want to put my hand on the hot stove. I'm going to actually try to protect and try to stay alive. And so if you think about, if you let your mind sort of ruminate, and you think about just the thoughts that come up, you might even write them down and see which thoughts do come up and what are the predominant thoughts. It's actually a pretty funny thing that you can do, an exercise. What are your top 10 hits for yourself? Like what? If you have your top 3 hits, what are the top 3 sort of thought patterns that that you have, that those monologues that you get yourself in, whatever they are? Are they mostly neutral? Are they mostly going towards positivity, kindness, compassion, love? Or are they mostly going towards self-judgment, negativity, sadness, depression? Now, I don't know what it is for you, but it might be interesting just to sort of pay attention to what are those thought patterns that come up for you when your mind just sort of ruminates. Now, what's important here is in when somebody is experiencing pain, pain can be associated very closely with negative thoughts, negative emotions. And one of the emotions that chronic pain especially can be associated with is depression. The thought of depression, maybe even the thought of worthlessness, the thought that you don't belong anymore. The thoughts of sadness may come up. And it's interesting because as we've studied where in the brain these brain areas are actually responsible for processing pain and processing emotions, such as depression or anxiety, what we found is that the same parts of the brain that actually process pain also process emotions like depression and anxiety, but also joy and happiness. But since our mind has a tendency of going towards the negative, since our mind has a tendency of remembering negative experiences better because of this survival technique that is actually wired in our neurons, what happens is that when we have a sensation of pain, we also have a sensation or a feeling of a negative thought or a negative emotion that comes up with that, and vice versa. So you can have, something can trigger, let's say, a negative thought, or you're driving down the freeway and you're simply ruminating about something, and it might tend to go to the negative. It might tend to go to a depression or a sadness. And simply by bringing up that memory, simply by bringing up that thought, we start feeling our pain increase. It's very, very common. It's very, very common that we have a thought, we're doing okay, driving down the freeway, and we might be thinking about something, maybe even a conversation, something comes up, and next thing you know, we have a thought, and boom, that thought actually triggers an increased sensation of pain. The same part of the brain is literally processing the pain as is processing that thought or that memory or that emotion. That's important because in our mind, they're not separate. They become what we call coupled. They become sort of one and the same. And then we get into these vicious spirals where, for instance, a thought, most frequently a negative thought, a negative memory, a negative emotion will trigger pain. And then what does the pain trigger? The pain will trigger increased anxiety, increased depression, which will trigger more negative thoughts, which will trigger more pain, which will trigger more negative thoughts, which will trigger more pain. And we can't get out of this vicious cycle. And this is where, for me, the practice of mindfulness has really helped. One of the patients was using their hand to show, and I go, and I'm talking to them about this concept of, you have a negative thought, and then a negative thought triggers another negative thought, and then another negative thought triggers another negative thought. And then, here you are, you're doing fine. And he uses his hand gesture. And I always sort of like it when I see these hand gestures, but it was a hand gesture sort of like, here I am, I'm going down this one path, and then I have this negative thought, and this negative thought, it's like a recurrent pattern for me. And what happens when I have a negative thought? His movement was sort of taking his hand and going, and like almost like he like he was riding a bike and he fell over, or he fell into the rut. And then when we're in the rut, we know, oh, I'm in the rut. How did I get in the rut again? Here I am. I'm in the rut. And we all know, if we've experienced this, we all know where the rut goes. We all know the experience of the rut. We all know that cycle of, okay, here I'm doing okay. And then something triggers us. And then I fall into the rut. And now, how many days, hours, minutes, weeks, whatever it is, does it take for us to get out of the rut? I had another patient who I was doing an assessment on, and their lawyer asked me, they're like, we can't figure out what's going on with this patient. His injury was 2 years ago. And so I did this assessment for the lawyer. And he was a soccer player, but he was hit in a motor vehicle accident. He was a pedestrian hit in a motor vehicle accident. And, I was talking to him and I was really asking him about his pain when he noticed it come on, what he did to help improve it, et cetera, et cetera. And I was talking to him about, triggers, sort of seeing if he can notice any triggers in his pain when he noticed that his neck pain or his low back pain starts to increase. And he made this realization in real time. And imagine this, right? He's got a history where he was hit by a car, and he's obviously going through some memory of being hit by the car, but he's 2 years after the event and he's doing okay. And he's trying to settle his case. Right? And anytime there's litigation involved, you always want to be careful of how the impact of the litigation is affecting the physiology of the pain and the brain. And it's very, very, very complex, very complex. But what he noticed was that he was doing okay. He would even have days and weeks where he was doing okay, where his pain level would be like a 1 or a 2, and he was able to function really well and work. And then all of a sudden, his pain levels would skyrocket to like 6 or 7 or 8. And what he realized just by coming to the visit, because he hadn't put this together, was that his pain always increased when he got an email from the lawyer that was talking about his settlement or his case. And, you got an email and says, well, they're doubting that you were really injured, so they want you to be assessed by this neuropsychologist. And what happened to his pain levels? Well, his stress levels increased, right? His frustration, his anger maybe increased. And in real time, his pain levels went from like a 2 to an 8. As he's reading these emails from his lawyer telling him, let's say, that the defense side doubts that he was really injured, or the defense side doubts that he really has PTSD, or whatever it might be. Right? So what happens, because our brain is wired in such a way where emotions and where pain, the actual sensation of pain, gets processed in the same areas, sometimes what happens is that there's this coupling between an emotion and a sensation. That emotion could actually be an emotion of, let's say, joy, and a sensation of our heart expanding. Most of the time, we actually need to train ourselves to have that sort of sensation of joy, heart expanding, sensation of joy, heart expanding. The majority of us have, let's say, a sensation of pain or discomfort, and then some sort of anger, frustration, stress, anxiety, depression, sadness, whatever that might be. And so with the practice of mindfulness, what we start to do, and this is why, right, in the introduction to mindfulness class, what we start to do is we start to unpackage, we start to unravel the sensations from the emotions. We start to literally uncouple them, where we notice, oh, look, I just had a thought and that thought generated this sensation. Or look, I just had this sensation and that sensation actually generated this thought, which generated this emotion. And so what we want to try to do is really start to unravel, unpack this, so that we can be present with what shows up in the present moment. And literally, okay, as if we had the capacity to undo the Velcro-ness, to undo the stickiness of whatever it is. If we are experiencing an unpleasant sensation, or we are experiencing depression, or that we start to disengage the identification of ourselves with that emotion. That we disengage the identification of ourselves with that sensation. And that we see it. The mind might react instantaneously. And as we do the practice of mindfulness, we notice this domino effect that may happen so suddenly, we don't even realize that it's coupled, that it's literally one on top of the other. And so with the practice of mindfulness, what we can start doing is we can start just noticing, for instance, what are the thoughts that are arising? What are the emotions that are arising? And notice which thoughts we feel have more Velcro or stickiness attached to it. I can guarantee you that you have some thoughts that come and go, and you might not even recognize they came and gone. It's like the softest little blow of a flower in the wind, for instance. A petal floating in the wind. It's like you don't even know. Here's a thought, boom, it comes in, poof. And then there's those thoughts that you have, that we all have, that feel so heavy, that come down on us like a ton of bricks. That feels like, oh my goodness, how can I hold on? What is this? But in reality, it's just a thought. We just attach so much more meaning to it. Maybe that thought is associated with an emotion, because that thought, whatever happened, maybe it's a rumination of the past. And it was a survival, oh my goodness, I remember that. Yeah, thank God I veered off to the side. Otherwise, that car would have come in and smashed into me. And when I think about that, I tense up and I get really nervous, and now I have a hard time driving. Whatever it is. And to recognize, oh wow, that thought has a lot of, I call stickiness, gooiness, glue. The thoughts that come into your experience, and it's like they feel sticky. It's like they are sitting around. It's like, there's those cartoon characters that walk around, they have a cloud over their head and they're just always raining. It's like as if that thought was a cloud, that the cloud just stays. And it doesn't just wisp away. Just like you had another thought 5 minutes prior that just came and went. And this is the same thing that happens with emotions as well. That there are certain emotions that when you start to have the emotion, when you start to have that sensation in your body of that emotion, that there's a tendency for that emotion to stick around. And usually the negative emotions, just like the negative thoughts, have a greater ability to stick around because they're usually associated with some sort of survival mechanism. And we want to be aware of that. We want to be aware of that. We want to be aware, oh, what are the thoughts that I have that when they come, when they appear, that I give so much weight to them, that I give so much validity to them, that I identify immediately with them? What are the emotions that when I start having seem to just collect energy and build and stay and stagnate inside of me? What are those for you, for each one of us? And so mindfulness gives us tools to start working with those sticky thoughts, with those emotions that sort of sit. A great resource in this practice, all right, is finding either a place in your body or sort of using your imagination as if you were creating or feeling an intensely safe place in your body that you can go to, excuse me. If there were anything pleasant or beautiful here right now, what would it be? And these are exercises that you can actually do throughout the day. You know what? I'm feeling pretty crummy right now. My pain seems to be increasing. Oh, if there were anything pleasant or beautiful here right now, what would it be? And bringing it up in your imagination. Okay. And the more detailed you can get about all your senses, the more your body actually thinks it's true. What do you see? What do you hear? What are you hearing? What are you touching, smelling, tasting? Include the company you're with, friends, loved ones, or are you alone? Right? Literally bring in, what does it feel like to be in that company? What does it feel like to be in that setting? What does it feel like to feel those sensations? Once you've found this place, and we used to do this practice, I used to do this practice, call it the happy bath. Every Friday, not that you have to get in a bath, but that you immerse yourself in a bath, sort of in an imaginative bath that you feel safe in, that you're actually creating with your senses in real time, and you're bathing yourself in this happy bath place. Once you have found something pleasant or beautiful, bring your full attention to it for a few moments. Take it all in, being aware that this is a joyful moment. Relish it, savor it. Now, once you practice that, practice going to your happy bath. Have that place familiar to you so that you can bring that place up if necessary, so that you can connect to that place. I'm feeling kind of crummy right now. I'm going to connect in with my happy bath. I know what happens when I feel crummy. I start having crummy thoughts. I get really anxious and I go into my rut, and it takes me about 2 or 3 days to get out of my rut, or 2 or 3 weeks, or 2 or 3 months, whatever that might be. I'm going to see if there's something different. I'm going to see if there's something, I hear that there's sadness, but I'm going to see if there's something different for me right now. I'm going to see if if I can actually shift my experience just a bit and go into my happy bath. Now, the more you repeat that, the more you're actually able to bring it up in more stressful situations, or when your pain is not a 2 out of 10, but an 8 out of 10, where you're actually able to bring that up. Okay. So when we practice mindfulness, like I said, mindfulness of thoughts, mindfulness of emotions, mindfulness of sensations, what we're trying to do in that is as we practice mindfulness, as we practice noticing the thoughts or sensations that are arising, that by simply noticing them, we can disempower them. They have less stickiness. They have less glue. And this might not happen immediately, but this will happen over time, I guarantee you. Is that same sort of negatively ruminating thought will enter, and you'll be like, oh, there's my thought. Let me go into my mindfulness practice of just noticing it and letting it pass, just like any other thought, and not having the super strong Velcro associated with that thought that keeps it ruminating in our minds over and over again, letting us go into the rut, into the rut, into the rut, into the rut. Okay? And so that is one of the powers of mindfulness. We can disempower negative, catastrophizing, disempowering thoughts. We can decrease the identification with negative emotions and negative thoughts, right? And when we do that, one of the things that can happen, which can be very powerful, is that we can start to respond to our situation and not have to react to it. That we can see our situation with more clarity, that from the present moment, from that experience of the present moment, we get to choose what to do as opposed to have to react. Many of us in a mindless state maybe have snapped at somebody, maybe have responded in ways that we weren't so proud of ourselves afterwards, all through a reactivity that arose as opposed to an ability to respond. And I've noticed this in myself, mostly in things like self-defense, self-judgment, et cetera, where there's much less of a reactivity and much, much, much greater responsiveness, even to negative comments, negative judgments, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So what we're going to try doing today is finding a safe place in the body where we can feel like we can place our attention, and maybe bring in a place that we feel like is a little bit more unpleasant, that we and we can do a process called titrating. All right, so finding a comfortable position. A position that you feel relaxed yet alert. Closing your eyes if you feel comfortable closing your eyes. If not, having a soft downward gaze, as if you're looking off onto the horizon or looking over the ocean. Taking 2 or 3 deep breaths, and with each in-breath, bringing in the present moment with kindness and self-compassion. And with each out-breath, releasing any tension that you may be feeling in your body right now. With each in-breath, bringing in the present moment, whatever is present for you right now, and with each out-breath, relaxing your body ever so slightly more. And then breathing regularly at whatever pace is right for you. And just noticing what is here for you right now. And if you need to make subtle movements with your body to find a more comfortable position, now would be a good time to do so. And now bringing your attention to the contact points your feet are making with the floor or whatever surface they're on. Feeling the support of your chair, the floor, the couch. Really feeling the contact that your feet or legs are making with whatever surface they are resting on. And as your mind wanders, simply bringing it back to that contact. And now opening up your attention and scanning your whole body for an area that feels safe, that is not in pain, an area that isn't causing any tension, worry, or anxiety. If it isn't possible to find, look for an area that feels the safest for you. You don't need to overthink it. And if you feel more comfortable simply imagining an area, that can work too. See if you can find an area that feels safe in your body and bring your attention to this area. When you bring your attention, what arises for you in the present moment? What qualities allow you to recognize this area as safe? Is the area large or small? Does the area move? Does it change at all, or is it pretty fixed? Just simply notice what qualities of this area allow you to feel safe. And if your mind wanders, that's perfectly okay. That's what the mind does. Coming back to this place in your body that you feel safe. And now bring your attention, if you wish, to an area of your body that is painful. Notice what thoughts or emotions arise. If it becomes too overwhelming, you can go back and place your attention on where you feel safe. Simply noticing what thoughts or emotions arise. How you know that this place is safe. Does it feel expansive, warm, cool? Does it vibrate? And if you feel comfortable again, going back to the place in the body that you feel discomfort or pain. Simply see if you can notice the thoughts or emotions that are associated with this area. See if you can notice them without being attached to them. You can even try labeling them as thoughts, thinking, judging, self-deprecating. And now returning back to the place you feel safe. That this place in your body you feel safe is an anchor that you can return to over and over again. Notice the qualities of this place. What is your present moment experience when you place your attention on this place of safety? As your attention wanders, knowing that's exactly what your mind does. Simply redirecting it back to that sensation of safety. What do you notice? And as we bring this meditation to a close, see if this place of safety can be a resource for you throughout your day, for your thoughts, your emotions, or your sensations. You can choose to place your attention in this place. And now taking 2 or 3 deep breaths, opening your eyes if your eyes were closed, reorienting yourself to your room and surroundings, and just taking a moment to reflect on your experience.